Nicole, and today's video I'm going to be talking about all the books I've read in December. Yes, it's March. We're going to pretend that it's not 3 months late, but anyway, I read a whopping 28 books in December. I am not going to be talking about every single book I read in December in today's video. I'm going to do a part 1, which is today, and I will be doing a part 2. I will have a list down below of every single book that will be in part 2's wrap up, and of all the books that are in today's wrap up with timestamps, so you can pick and choose which books you are interested in hearing my thoughts on, because yeah, there's a lot. First, a lot of books I want to talk about are all by Bridget Kemmerer. Her most popular book on BookTube is A Curse So Dark and Lonely. So I started off by reading the sequel to that in December, which is A Heart So Fierce and Broken. This is the ARC, and it was very kindly gifted to me by Yasmin from Yasmin the Reader, who is just one of my lovely friends here. And I got to read this like a full month and a half early, which was fantastic. First book, A Curse So Dark and Lonely, is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I really liked it because it's kind of like about alternate universes. So the Beauty is from like our world, the Beast, or the Prince character, he is from an alternative world. With this sequel, I didn't love it as much. I gave it 3 stars, following 2 different characters. So the first book, A Curse So Dark and Lonely, we're following Harper, who is the Beauty, and Ren, who is the Prince. And then in this book, we're following Grey, who we did meet in book 1, and we're following a new character who is another princess from a different land. I really enjoyed the princess's POV. Her POV was my favorite, but I didn't like Grey's POV. I wasn't really impressed with any of the other characters. Even the other characters that we met in book 1, I thought that a lot of their development that took place in book 1 was kind of shattered by the actions that took place in this book. I can't really say too much. I was very underwhelmed with this book, and I think that I missed a lot of the things that made A Curse So Dark and Lonely really stand out for me, unfortunately. And I can't really say too much else without spoiling the plot for this, because this is a second book in a series. But yeah, it was disappointing. I'm still planning on picking up the 3rd book, which I believe will be the last book. Yeah, 3 stars to this one. I then read a few of Bridget Kemmerer's contemporary books. So the first one I read was Call It What You Want. I loved this so much. I don't read a lot of YA contemporary. I definitely put them off. I definitely avoid them, but this made me want to pick up more because of how much I loved this. We have a dual POV in this book. That seems to be Bridget Kemmerer's thing. She usually has one male and one female POV. In this book, we're following 2 high schoolers, and they're both dealing with a lot. Rob, in this, his father recently attempted suicide, and he survived the suicide attempt and now has a brain injury. Megan is dealing with the consequences because she did cheat on her SATs, and no one expected it from her because she's known as the good girl. What I loved about this book was how it was all about mistakes. It was mistakes that you made, mistakes that your parents made. It was how to forgive those who made mistakes, how to forgive yourself, and how to overcome them. Like, that's ultimately what this book was about, and I loved it. I loved the way it was done. I loved the characters. I particularly really loved Rob. He does start off at the beginning of the book. It's like the misunderstood boy in the high school. It talks a lot about privilege. It talks about white privilege. It talks about a lot of financial privilege, and I just really loved it. I loved all the side characters as well. We got to know Megan's family a lot in particular, and I really loved getting to know her sister. If you want to pick up a YA contemporary that's really hard-hitting, I really recommend this. I was so impressed. In the end, I gave it about a 4.75 stars. It just missed the 5-star mark for me because the ending was a little bit rushed, but it was so good. And I really highly recommend this. You can honestly read this in one sitting. It's tiny. It's so good. I can't recommend this enough. It's a new favorite of mine. I also picked up one of her other YA contemporaries, which is Letters to the Lost. Now, the reason I originally picked these books up was because Yasmin always goes on about her contemporaries. This is one of Yasmin's favorite books. I personally preferred Call It What You Want, but this is really good. Again, we have a male and female high schooler. They're both dealing with lost, as the title indicates. These 2 actually start interacting because the female protagonist leaves a letter to her mum on her mum's grave, and the male sees it and he starts writing it back, and then they start having this back and forth. This was also a buddy read that I did with Donna from Donna Sundoku, and we loved it. We had so much fun. And Donna said that it reminded her of You've Got Mail, which I've never seen. So if you like with You've Got Mail, then maybe give this a go. I really did prefer, though, the male's POV in this other than the female. I really didn't like the female. I think her name was Juliet. So Juliet and Declan. I preferred Declan's POV. Didn't really love Juliet. I did come around to caring for her, but she bugged me so much at the start because Declan is, again, the misunderstood, but I feel like he's even more misunderstood than the other guy from the other book because he's got this bad boy rep at the school and no one wants anything to do with him. Juliet at the beginning of the book is literally just calling him a loser for no reason. I know him personally, and she just annoyed me. Like, she was just, it took me a really long time to warm up to her. I definitely preferred Declan. And even when their whole backstories were revealed, Declan was a lot more of a better character. That's actually one thing I should add with both of these, particularly for Letters to the Lost, I think. But there's kind of like a mystery of the characters' backstories, and I really, really loved how it was revealed and how we like got to know them. I highly recommend both of these. I mean, like I said, I do prefer Call It What You Want, but Letters to the Lost is still really great. These aren't part of a series, they're just YA contemporaries by the same author. I think I gave Letters to the Lost 4 stars. I then finished The Bone season by Samantha Shannon. I started off listening to the audiobook of this, which was a huge mistake. I don't think I've ever struggled so much with an audiobook. I ended up having to switch to reading the ebook. It took me, I think, a month and a half to read. It's really jarring because it is one of the most info dumpy books I've ever read. So there's clairvoyance, right, which is those who have magical abilities in this world. And our main character is a dreamwalker, I think it is. She can walk into people's dreams. But there's like groups of clairvoyance, so then there's like groups of groups. So when you're listening to the audiobook, they're just throwing all these names at you with little explanation of like what they actually do a lot of the time. And so it was just like so hard to try and memorize who was in what group. It was a lot. Like, I'm gonna do such a poor job at explaining what this book is about because I struggled so much to get into it, and even now I'm still confused. I think it would be a lot better to read physically, to make notes, and to also reread. I think I would get a lot more comprehension of the world and I would enjoy it now. I would say it's an urban fantasy cross dystopian novel. We are following, like I said, this young girl who's about 19, Paige, and she works in this criminal underworld where she uses her abilities, so she can walk into dreams, and she uses that in this organization. Now, those who are clairvoyants, they are really feared in society and they can be quite outcasted, so she actually hides who she is so her father doesn't know, and she secretly works in this organization. At the very beginning, like literally chapter 1 or chapter 2, she's kidnapped to this other kind of underworld where it's this alternate world. Like, I gave this book a 3 stars, but there's a lot of groundwork there for a really potentially great story. Getting the grasp of that story was really difficult for me. If you're gonna pick this book up, don't listen to the audiobook. I recommend reading the physical book and taking notes because I was lost. I did really like a lot of elements to it and it did get interesting as it went on and we learned a bit more about the magic, but I will say that I think a lot of the characters weren't developed that much or at all. Paige, the main character, was, but there were just a lot of side characters that I really didn't care much about. So yeah, I was gonna try and continue straight after with the next book, but I didn't. So I think I'm gonna go back eventually and reread this because I think it is a potentially great book. It's just a lot of effort. I then finished the audiobook for Starsight by Brandon Sanderson, which is the sequel to Skyward. I love this. I love this series so much. I love Brandon Sanderson. Like, I'm a broken record at this point, but this was great. I have seen mixed reviews on this, I will say. A lot of people didn't love this as much as the first book because it definitely takes a different direction to the story, which I personally think was necessary. I loved that in this book it really expanded on the world. Haven't heard of Skyward. We are following this young girl who's training to be a pilot, and she's on this planet of humans who are confined, and they're confined and fighting against the Crow, which is this alien species who won't let them leave this planet. And it's just this constant ongoing battle that's been going on for as long as they know. In the second book, we're learning a lot more what's actually happening in the outside world because, like I said, the first books are very confined and we're just learning about what's happening with Spencer and training him to be a pilot and just like the basic stuff. We got more world building. That's what I really loved. I loved that we got to know the alien species. That was so fun. One thing I did really miss was in book 1, there is an amazing cast of characters and they aren't as present in this book. Some of them are hardly present at all, and I think that's a huge critique a lot of people have said, but I think it was really necessary for the story to develop. This is going to be a 4 or 5 book series, so it didn't personally bother me. I mean, I still gave this book 5 stars in Goodreads, but if we're being honest, it's probably a 4.75. Still amazing, still good. I will also say that this pacing was slower as well. The beginning of the book starts off and it's like so fast paced and all this stuff's happening, and then it definitely like slows down, and the rest of the book is pretty slow until like the very end. I've read so many Brandon Sanderson books, so I'll just talk about the rest of them now. So I finished The Hero of Ages. I think this is my favorite book of the month. It's either this or Call It What You Want is my favorite book. I love this. This is just, like, honestly, this is the definition of epic. I can't say too much about this because this is the final book in the Mistborn trilogy. The Mistborn trilogy, we are following Vin and this gang of thieves who come up with this mission to overthrow the Empire because the Empire is being ruled by a tyrant. We have magic where they swallow these metals, and each metal gives the person a particular magical ability, but only those who are Mistborn are able to swallow all the metals and possess all the abilities. Most people don't have any magical powers, and some have like one. So I love this. I can't say anything, but it's just such a satisfying ending. I love that characters who at the very beginning in book 1 seemed so minor, seemed so insignificant, by this point in the story they really had a role. I felt like everything that had happened, everything that had been put on the page from book 1 served a purpose, and we saw that purpose play out in this book. It's just incredible. So, because I finished that, if you aren't familiar with the Mistborn books, that is the first era book, Mistborn, and then there is the sequel era, or the sequel series, which starts off with The Alloy of Law, Shadows of Self, and Bands of Mourning. Sad, but like kind of funny story. I thought this was a trilogy and I thought it was completed. So I got to the Bands of Mourning and I was reading it, and then I realized, like, how is this going to end? And then I finished, like, I got to the end, and obviously that wasn't the end. There's going to be one more book. I don't know when it's coming out, but yeah, that was kind of sad. I was expecting to like finish off another trilogy. The Era of Mistborn takes place a few hundred years after the events of the final book, but this is so cool because whereas Mistborn's kind of medieval feeling, these books are very much Wild Wild West vibes. There are trains, there are guns, whereas in the Mistborn series, the original era, there are no trains, there are no guns. Like, they very much use medieval weapons and transportation. It was so great to see the development of this world. Also, I won't say too much because it kind of spoils it, but there's also a development in like the politics and also in the magic systems. One of the main characters we follow in this is a descendant of one of the characters from the Mistborn trilogy, and the characters from the original Mistborn trilogy are like legends in here. Yeah, like I was saying, it's Wild Wild West vibes, kind of murder solving mystery as well at the start, and then it gets more into the politics and stuff. They're quite short, so they were really easy for me to fly through. I think I read like each of these within a day. Yeah, I love Brandon Sanderson. I gave all these 5 stars. I was surprised, no we are not. I've been reading Harry Potter, so I read Chamber of Secrets, Prisoner of Azkaban, and I must have forgotten to collect it, but I did also read The Goblet of Fire. It's so hard for me to like talk about Harry Potter because like everyone knows what it's about and I love it, so I'm completely biased towards it. So all I will say is Prisoner of Azkaban is my favorite Harry Potter book. I also really like Goblet of Fire. That is probably my second favorite. The reason I love Prisoner of Azkaban is I can remember growing up feeling like with book 1 and book 2 we didn't get much of Hermione, and I really loved Hermione. I also just love learning more about the backstory of Harry's parents and Sirius Black. Love that this book also does take the darker turn. 5 stars to all 3 of these. Last lot of books I have to talk about. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of nervous because this series is so popular. So I read The Dark Artifices, which if you don't know is the 3rd set of series from the Shadowhunter Chronicles. The first book is Lady Midnight. This was the 3rd time I read it. I then read Lord of Shadows for the 2nd time, and then I read for the 1st time Queen of Air and Darkness. I've talked about this before, but I did grow up reading the Mortal Instruments series, which is Cassandra Clare's first book, so the Shadowhunter world in general is very nostalgic for me, but from the get-go I haven't loved The Dark Artifices as much as I have her previous series. I don't know if it's because I've grown out of her books or because I'm too used to her writing and they're too predictable for me. I've talked about this before, but I don't like predictability. However, I still had a lot of fun. Like, I still find this series so fun. It's so nostalgic. I love how we have a full cast of characters. Lady Midnight, we are following this girl called Emma, who is a shadow hunter, and she lost her parents when she was 12 years old. She believes that the circumstances of her parents' death is really mysterious and that there is a mystery to solve. So she is on a mission, on a revenge mission, basically, to solve her parents' deaths and to find the murderer. I remember when this was announced, I was so excited because if you're not familiar with the Shadowhunter world, Emma and a lot of the characters in this series are actually introduced into the series prior to this one, and they're introduced as kids, and I thought that was such a unique and kind of cool concept that we got to meet these characters when they were really young and get to know their backstory then, and then come into this with that knowledge. Like, that's such a unique experience. I don't have that experience with any other series. So I had this really particular idea in mind of who Emma was going to be before I read this, because I'd met her in a previous series and her story was really set up. But she really wasn't that. Like, she's supposed to be this girl who wants to be the best warrior of her generation, and I just really feel like that doesn't really happen. She spends more time worrying about the boys she's dating than actually training. First book was when I liked her the most because she was really invested into solving her parents' murder and all of that, but that whole situation with her parents and the revenge is solved in book 1. And then in book 2 and 3, the whole conflict with her is wants to be with Julian, who she's in love with, but Julian is her parabatai, and in this world that means they kind of bonded, but you're not allowed to be with your parabatai. There's a law against it, so they can't be together, and they're gonna have this secret romance and all of this. And that's literally Emma's like entire plotline, and that's what drove me nuts about her. Was there was no other really story for her or really no other development. She was always with Julian, like pretty much every scene. Particularly in Lord of Shadows and Queen of Air and Darkness, she was always with Julian. Constantly told that she wants to be the greatest shadow hunter and that she wants to work really hard for it, but she never trains. And there's this like one scene in Queen of Air and Darkness where she's finally training for like the 3rd time out of this whole trilogy, and then one of the other characters walking in, and then they start talking about Julian. Either she was with Julian or she was talking about Julian, and it just like drove me nuts. For me, Lady Midnight has always been a 3 stars, and I think because of how heavily focused it is on Emma and Julian. It's not that I don't even like their characters, it's just like I just don't see much in their characters. I just don't feel invested in them. Julian, I will say, I love his relationship with the family. He has this huge family with all these siblings, and he's kind of like the step-in dad because they don't have parents and all his siblings are younger than him, and I love their dynamic so much. It's my favorite thing out of this series. And with Julian, I feel like I was never invested in him at all. He feels like a very much, this is so insulting, but he feels like such a watered down version of a lot of Cassandra Clare's other male characters. There was potential for him to turn into a villain. Like, you read the series, you think the storyline's heading that Julian's going to become a villain, and that would have been just such an interesting and unique concept for Cassandra Clare to explore, because it's so different to everything else that she has done up to now, but it didn't go that direction. I will say I really enjoy Lord of Shadows. This is my favorite book in the trilogy. I love this because I love that there wasn't much of a focus with Emma and Julian. Like, to be completely honest, I think that's why I love this book a lot more. There's a lot more focus on the other characters. So we have like Kit, Ty, and Livy, and then we have Christina, Mark, and Kieran. I just love all of them and all their dynamics. I had a lot of fun. We also got to learn more about Diana, and you get to learn more about the fair folk in here, which I really, really enjoyed. This is what I'm nervous for. Queen of Air and Darkness. I gave 1 star. Yeah, I was not a fan. For the reasons I kind of explained with Emma and Julian. Let me say this, I was really enjoying the first 200 pages of this, and then I think it got to about page 250, almost 300, and there is something that happens in here I can't say because it is the 3rd book in a series, but it's also a trope I hate, but it's a plot trope. Every time this trope happens, it just like, I just want to like, I don't like DNF books, but I wanted to DNF the book, and it got me so angry. Anyway, the thing is with that plot trope, it just feels to me like the author uses it to quickly get from point A to point B and to kind of solve the problems that are present in the story, and it just drives me nuts. Like, I just feel like it's pointless. It's the easy way out. I really don't like it. So that happened, and after that it was kind of like a catalyst, and then everything else that happened, I was like, are you kidding me? Is this a joke? Like, I just didn't like the writing, and I didn't like the decisions that were happening with the characters, with the plot. It was something I was not happy about at all. So yeah, for that reason I gave it 1 star. Also was like, oh my god, everyone's getting paired up. I really hated Ty's storyline in this. I did write a Goodreads review, so if I have done that, like I've written a draft, if I've done that and posted it, I'll leave a link down below so you can hear my spoiler thoughts. I can't say a whole lot about this because it is spoilers. I was expecting to love it. Like, I've heard so many people say that this is their favorite Cassandra Clare book, that she's getting better with each book, and I thought this was like one of the worst written books of hers I've read, just in terms of plot. I just thought it was just... One thing I really do need to add though is that with each book, Cassandra Clare gets better and better with her representation. I can't speak for all the representation on how well it is done, but there is so much of it. I couldn't tell you if there was more straight couples or if there were more diverse couples. Like, I couldn't tell you. For someone who's so big in YA, that's a really great thing to see that she's doing. But yeah, I mean, look, I probably have more to say about this. When I was reading this, I was literally messaging like 6 different people ranting about this and how much I was hating it. So if you're one of those people who was there for me in my time of need, thank you. I appreciate you so much. Like, I was so mad. It was kind of ridiculous. But yeah, sorry, but it really didn't work for me. Well, those are some of the books I read in December, and like I said, there will be a part two coming as well. So I'll have a list down below of all the books in this one and all the books in the next one with timestamps. So yeah, thank you. Let me know your thoughts on any of these books. If you agree with me, if you disagree, if you have anything to add, please do. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're enjoying whatever you are currently reading, and I will see you next time. Bye!